Este aparatoso casco provisto de monitores de cristal líquido nos permiten intuir la llamada realidad virtual, un duplicado electrónico de la realidad tridimensional.
Computer fever broke out in the early 1990s. People began to talk about cyberspace and virtual reality. Advertising promised a better and easier world thanks to technology.
Have you ever borrowed a book from thousands of miles away? Across the country?
Gesture ahead. Take next exit.
Without stopping for directions?
Route 101.
Or sent someone a fax? From the beach? You will.
Others warned of the dangers of being manipulated and oppressed by that same technology.
La gente realmente veía en estas nuevas tecnologías un elemento liberalizador, ¿no? Independientemente de que hay cosas que esperábamos y hay cosas que no esperábamos y que han sucedido.
The digital promise is an optimistic view of the future.
Una falacia.
Evolución.
Meaningfulness.
Still amazing.
Poignant.
Desafío.
Danger.
Un oxímoron.
Beware.
Arte global.
Reevaluate.
Future's bright.
Global net selected.
La realidad virtual era prácticamente el tema, el monotema de ese año, ¿no? Todo el mundo hablaba de realidad virtual.
But at that time, the world wasn't exactly worried about virtual reality.
Just a little one. Why is American? Settle. Second floor. Second for nothing. Second for nothing less. Second for nothing less than the object I need to sell.
The comedian Philip Proctor said that the 90s are just the 60s upside down.
I never understood why 90s culture, techno culture, stank of patchouli oil, you know, and had the rancid, rank sort of hangover from the 60s that it did.
Cyberculture is the cousin of the 60s counterculture. Both were born in California and they have ideals in common. The collaborative spirit, the utopia of a better world, and the quest for freedom through non-conventional means.
The aim of using drugs.
En los 60, el interés de nuestro grupo por el uso de drogas era averiguar cómo respondía la conciencia del individuo ante esos estímulos y así crecer como personas. Ahora, en los 90, tenemos un nuevo método de ampliar la conciencia y hacernos más inteligentes en beneficio propio a través del ordenador.
I had just stopped using psychedelics and was introduced to digital technology and thought, oh, this is the next step in that same journey.
Psychedelia and classic rock made a comeback in the 90s. Lenny Kravitz seemed to want to be Jimi Hendrix. There was a rerun of the Woodstock Festival. some people decided to go back to Vietnam. And grunge fans could be thought of as the new hippies.
Benvinguts a ArtFutura 90.
In an era without the internet or media libraries, in a city like Barcelona, festivals like ArtFutura connects us with distant realities that were otherwise invisible.
Yo creo que ArtFutura fue interesante en el sentido de que el mundo entonces, estamos hablando del año 90, nos comunicábamos por carta. Nosotros ni siquiera teníamos fax en la primera edición, ¿no? Y era muy difícil realmente tener acceso a todo este tipo de comunicación.
The writer William Gibson, the guru of cyberpunk, was one of the festival's mentors. In his novel Neuromancer, he coined the term cyberspace when hardly anyone was connected to the internet. He outlined a bleak but fascinating technological future.
I think the future has already arrived. The problem is it's not very evenly distributed. Some of us are living in the 21st century and some of us are living in the 5th.
In that future, the senses are replaced by digital simulation, and human beings can escape from the trials of the physical world using machines.
Hello, my name is Laurie Anderson. Just arrived here in Barcelona and have been asked to speak about the future. What does it mean to make art? Why do people bother to do this? I mean, to have something to hang in people's living rooms, to create yet another copy of the real world. All this speculation doesn't really matter.
Art usually anticipates the future. During these years, companies hire artists as a challenge for their engineers, when 1 minute of computer animation could take months of work.
I think artists were largely responsible for our cultural appreciation for these technologies.
In some cases, they seem to be limited to being mere demonstrations of technology. In others, they offer us images of great beauty.
Yo creo que la tecnología digital en el arte está aportando muchísimas cosas. Lo que pasa que no siempre el arte está, digamos, en consonancia, en sincronía con la realidad, ¿no?
Experimentation is always something for the minority, But without it, what came next would not exist.
El arte es una mutación constante, es decir, constantemente necesitamos nuevas formas de expresión.
Cyberculture cannot be understood without interactivity. Artists strive to include it in their expression. Net art is the most radical example of this, but is now practically forgotten.
Net art is interesting because you can say it was a last art movement. There has been no new art movement after net art. So now it's fantastic, historical artifact, but of course how to exhibit it, it's very difficult.
El espectáculo sigue con la fura.
Some more organic artists decided to incorporate technology into their work and opened a door that would not close again.
When I went to the La Fura performance, to me it was the same as virtual reality, but in the physical world. The audience had to move around a three-dimensional space. They were all over. The audience was very interactive.
Sí, recuerdo que en el año 89 empezamos a trabajar con Rebecca Allen, que ella nos enseñó los secretos del vídeo y fue una época que había ArtFutura en Barcelona y entonces conocimos a Timothy Lear, a Gibson, el autor del Negroponte, y entonces vimos que todo aquello que ellos anunciaban en sus libros, o el propio Timothy Lear, que había experimentado con el LCD y después cuando murió conectado a Internet su corazón para que todo el mundo pudiera ver su propia muerte, pues nos abrió una serie de ventanas.
The more modern side of theatre shifted to the more classical, towards opera. Technology was now part of the way they thought about staging.
Más aburrido que ver a un tío andando en un escenario y hablar nada más, que es lo que yo veo casi siempre. La tecnología digital ha aportado a la ópera las escenografías de luz. O sea, estábamos en el mundo del cartón piedra. Nosotros hemos llegado a hacer óperas donde también algún cantante o narrador ha estado no en el lugar del público, sino estaba a miles de kilómetros de distancia y hablaba desde otro lugar y estaba integrado en el mismo sitio. Todas esas cosas es posible hacerlo ahora con la tecnología.
Many people consider Charles Babbage to be the first designer of a computer. In his book, How Music Works, David Byrne says that Babbage's computer was musical and argues that music has always played a pioneering role. David Byrne discusses how technology changes both the way music is composed and how it is listened to. It changes the way music is consumed in public and in private. After the Walkman, portable digital devices proliferated. Music flooded the world, and silence became unusual.
La música puede ser la punta de lanza de ciertos avances técnicos, primero por volumen, seguramente es de las artes más globales que hay y populares. La música está en la calle, la música está en las celebraciones, la música está digamos, en casa de todo el mundo.
In the 1980s, music videos appeared as visual culture exploded. Videos meant that musicians could appear on many television channels at once without having to be there in person. Thanks to technology, they became sophisticated and surprising. The image was the new goddess, and musicians placed a lot of emphasis on multimedia. The visual side also became a key aspect of live concerts. Electronic musicians stand still on a stage, manipulating a computer or pushing some tiny buttons. They needed a visual environment, something to complete the show. VJs were born, and the visual environment went beyond its electronic boundaries. Interestingly, this high degree of technical sophistication was often linked to the primitive rhythms of techno. Raves were the ultimate expression of unapologetic electronic hedonism.
El cambio digital es un cambio muy importante a nivel escénico. Para poner un ejemplo, ahora mismo los artistas a veces casi más complejo el entramado digital que nos están pidiendo de conexión inalámbrica entre escenario, controles de sonido, vídeo, luces, que los cables de antaño. Y luego el espectáculo en sí, yo creo que hay cada vez más artistas que juegan con la idea de la nube, la idea de la interacción en directo con el público a través de los dispositivos digitales.
Experimentation also has its place and includes the creation of new instruments. It has never been easier to write and record music.
Yo creo que las herramientas digitales han permitido el acceso a los medios de producción de gente más joven, de gente con medios mucho menores, que no tiene que depender de un productor o de un sistema de producción clásico para poder realizar ese sueño, esa idea.
Platforms with huge catalogues for non-stop, low-cost music listening push piracy to one side. It is a time of enormous musical consumption when many musicians rely on their live performances to survive, as what they receive for their recordings is negligible. The record companies fail to react, and now other companies begin to take a piece of the pie. Byrne and other musicians accuse the music distribution via the internet of undermining creativity.
En cuanto a industria, el cambio digital ha sido un cambio enorme. Yo estoy muy a favor en cuanto al acceso a los contenidos y creo que esto ha beneficiado a público y a creadores. Y soy crítico en cuanto a la forma y el proceso en que esto ha sucedido.
The artist has benefited from technology and is now self-sufficient to obtain an end product. Money keeps flowing into other hands, not exactly the same ones as 20 years ago, but there is no difference. The transformation of art into money, the businessman behind the work, is what makes things change. It reached film later, but the same phases that music went through appear to be rapidly repeating themselves. The special effects that used to be simply a complement to the narrative become its main focus. However, the revolution in animated films was also in the content. Double layers of meaning are included, so that adults watch films no longer simply as their children's companions. The production company Pixar was crucial in this process.
Creo que ha habido un abuso, en cierta manera, pero sobre todo en saturar a la retina del espectador de información digital a través del efecto. Por eso muchas veces se dice, esta película es aburrida. A lo mejor las nuevas generaciones más acostumbradas al videojuego, etcétera, no. Pero las generaciones medias y mayores no cogen este tipo de cine.
Film is also following in music's footsteps in terms of how it is consumed. It is no longer a social event involving going to the cinema, it is consumed by individuals. First at home, and then anywhere. New attractions, technological breakthroughs such as 3D, are needed to bring audiences back to the big screen.
El efecto especial pasa a ser protagonista sobre la historia incluso, y que muchas películas se han convertido en demos de tecnología de lo que se puede hacer. Una carrera tecnológica a ver quién hace el efecto más alucinante. Pero también ha cortado la diferencia entre truco y realidad, con lo cual la fe del espectador, lo que ponía el espectador de magia en las pantallas, ha desaparecido.
The dream is always the same.
The film Final Fantasy, an attempt at photorealism involving a huge effort and ruining its backers, emerged from a blockbuster video game.
This is it. Dr. Ross has opened the door for us. I say we go in.
La intención de, en este caso, de trasladar primero el lenguaje del manga y del videojuego de una forma muy literal a un cine más mainstream, algo que no acabó de estar bien conjugado. Segundo, Final Fantasy intentaba hacer ese hiperrealismo a través de los efectos digitales que resultaba a la postre muy falso.
Where are we?
I'm not sure.
For now, the idea of creating virtual stars, digital actors who are always available, immune to fatigue and other human weaknesses without astronomical financial demands, has been placed on the back burner.
You okay?
Video games are the first purely digital cultural expression or entertainment. Interactive and fully participatory, with no preordained ending. They were initially aimed at children and teenagers. These digital natives have grown up with them. The turnover of the video game industry far exceeds that of the movie business.
Se podría comparar el mundo de los videojuegos al mundo del cine en el siglo XX, porque seguramente los videojuegos acaben siendo el arte típico del siglo XXI, igual que el cine lo fue en el siglo XX.
Video games provide the virtual split personality that is so popular in cyberculture. The ability to be someone else, a racing driver, a legendary warrior, an alien exterminator, a sexual athlete. The second major factor in its digital DNA is its interconnection, the ability to interact with many other people remotely that is sublimated with massive multiplayer games. Being someone else, having multiple personalities, goes across the entire internet and the digital world.
How can you be in two places at once when you're not anywhere at all? Well, they had it almost exactly right, which is when you are in two places at once, that is to say, you have some sense of discorporation.
One of the things the net allows you is to really disperse your identity. And that's one of the first things I studied, is that people who had many identities for many different purposes, and they found that to be the wonderful thing that the net allowed. So for example, if you were a woman, but I wanted to have the experience of being a man. I could go onto a space on the net where I could have the experience of being a man.
In cyberculture, where everything seems to dematerialize, there is nevertheless a great obsession with the body. At the end of the day, wanting to be someone else, not only in the virtual world, is logical.
Lo digital es como una gran cueva negra y tú tienes que ir palpando las paredes y las piedras del techo para descubrirlo. Y para mí una forma de hacerlo es utilizando mi propio cuerpo.
Stelarc is convinced that an extension of the body is an extension of the mind. He expands his body with prosthetics, seeking new functions and sculpting what he believes to be the human being of the future. And he does this using an enormous cyberpunk apparatus, making his body an artistic subject and object.
Technology has always been connected to the human body. Technology is what it means to be human. We should not have a Frankensteinian fear of tampering with the human body. Yo creo que la idea de la prótesis y sobre todo la idea del cyborg formaba parte de esta utopía, ¿no? Y es una utopía que se ha ido diluyendo. Primero porque todos somos un poco cyborgs. Hemos asumido este hecho desde las prótesis dentales, las operaciones de cataratas, los marcapasos, en sus últimas extensiones ciertos fármacos, etc.
The French artist Orlan takes it to extremes. She does not add prosthetics or add parts to her body, but instead undergoes surgery. And as if it were a television show, in which Orlan wants to change her face and make herself into a work of art, while protesting that she is fighting against DNA. Something that does not seem too far removed from modern aesthetic surgery. An idea, the disguise underneath which, by being someone else, we can behave differently, push boundaries, explore new paths. The idea of the separation of the mind and body involves a certain contempt for what authors like William Gibson called the prison of flesh. But voices like Marvin Minsky, the father of artificial intelligence, say that man and machine have converged and the process is irreversible. The first robots were conceived in man's likeness. They were designed to perform tasks related to servitude, while attempts were made to give them a veneer of likability. And artists amused themselves by working with these similarities and differences. or in extreme cases, like the survival research laboratory shows that shocked audiences with their war robots in the 90s. But the most effective robots are the ones, unlike the human body, that have been around for years. Industrial robots programmed for routine or dangerous tasks performed endlessly and with little margin for error. And the most powerful robots, they are invisible, intelligent, and purely electronic. With enormous computing power and secret algorithms, they are used for business, spying, and political control. The military has always been at the core of almost all new technologies: fiber optics, GPS, the internet, artificial intelligence. In modern war, the military recruits its drone pilots from among the best gamers. There is little difference between killing in a game or at a distance of thousands of miles, because everything happens on a screen. The electronic robot is on the path of artificial intelligence. Justifying the arguments of that evolution is an issue of technology rather than Darwin. When Garry Kasparov lost to the supercomputer Deep Blue, some thought it was anecdotal. Today, any cheap software can defeat a chess grandmaster.
Kenyon's excavation of this city mentioned in Joshua showed the walls had been repaired 17 times. Watson.
What is Jericho?
Correct.
Another supercomputer named Watson won the very human competition of a game show.
Worth every penny, as I certainly did. We'll be right back after this.
The mathematician Alan Turing, one of the fathers of computing, devised a test to determine whether a machine can think or not. Many think they'll soon be able to. Others, like robotics professor Hiroshima Ishiguro, argue that there's no real intelligence without emotion.
Can a machine have humor? That's pretty interesting. That, to me, would be, a much more complex thing to do. But the quick answer is yes. Anything you can imagine will happen in a machine.
Artificial intelligence, the possibility of a non-human brain, has great detractors and advocates. Raymond Kurzweil, the champion of artificial intelligence and posthumanism, announced the arrival of the singularity in 2029, when the cybernetic brain would surpass the human brain. It is no coincidence that Kurzweil is the director of engineering for Google and the creator of Singularity University, which aims to educate, inspire, and empower leaders to implement exponential technologies to tackle the major challenges facing humanity. It's all a little bit frightening.
I think that the people predicting that we'll have artificial intelligence anytime soon, even if they're right about the trend, they're wrong about the speed.
I believe artificial intelligence can and will be a dangerous avenue. Artificial intelligence basically means to mimic human intelligence, and with the scale of supercomputers and big data, they can draw upon mass amounts of information instantaneously. And also data and information is ubiquitous, meaning it can come and go from anywhere at any time for any purpose.
Driverless cars, which have already been perfected, could prevent accidents and make our lives much easier. Computers are not only able to perform more or less mechanical tasks such as translating, they can now write texts themselves. More worrying are other functions, such as stock exchange transactions carried out by computers without any human involvement, which have already caused a few shocks in the financial markets. The ghost of a superbrain has been looming since the beginning.
The fear was that computers were like superhuman, that they were going to be more intelligent than us, that they would take away their jobs, our jobs, which in some cases that's been true.
The idea that the machines will leave people without any jobs, which emerged during the Industrial Revolution, is gathering pace once again.
Let it replace all the things, like when everyone's worried robots are going to take over all these jobs, I'm like, let it take over the jobs that don't involve like higher intelligence. Let it take over the things that it can do better and let humans do what we do really well.
In the future, there will be two kinds of jobs. There will be people who tell computers what to do, and there will be people who are told what to do by computers.
Writers like James Barrett go beyond the issue of employment. Barrett predicts the end of humanity caused by an artificial superintelligence able to alter its original programming. Impossible to stop. An authority like Stephen Hawking says that this is a very real danger. At the end of the day, the most technologically advanced tribe always wins. Technology is indistinguishable in our lives. It has penetrated every layer of human activity, all the time and everywhere. The idea of the World Wide Web is as broad as the world itself.
We're living by Moore's Law. So everything's going to keep getting better, the economy's going to get bigger, our data's going to get more dense, and people are supposed to follow along that.
Previous technological revolutions sought to extend our bodies. In the digital revolution, we are witnessing the expansion of our minds. In the 1990s, people talked about computer-designed things as if that was a value in itself. Today, no one would talk in those terms unless they wanted to raise a laugh. 25 years after the advent of virtual reality, between what a 1990s 3D film like this one promised us and the naturalness of this one, there is an abyss. A quarter of a century, which seems like an eternity, although we're only at the end of the digital childhood. Theo Jansen's creatures are close to the idea of artificial life. They were created on a computer, something that is no longer important. Everything seems to operate differently. Economics, health, security, communication, work, education, leisure, culture, consumption. Some new initiatives are challenging the old ways. But really, the logic that governs the world has not fundamentally changed. We are now interconnected. We are now global. Does this mean that we've achieved greater equality? or that we've come together as parts of an international market? The constant presence of multi-screens symbolizes the state of constant connectedness that produces an immeasurable amount of data. The classic temples of knowledge full of books have made way for antiseptic air-conditioned rooms that house millions of terabytes, which is becoming increasingly cheaper to store. These enormous amounts of information are known as big data. In 2009 alone, the same amount of data was produced as in the entire history of mankind up to that point. There is a high demand for big data for commercial and political purposes. Data provided by people, consciously or otherwise, and by millions of sensors around the world.
One of the main issues today for what I call software culture is who is in command. So today we have two classes. We have programmers, data scientists, statisticians, who can make sense of big data, find patterns, help companies become more efficient, and then there is everybody else who just willingly or unwillingly giving data to companies. So the key thing is to teach more people about how data works, how to analyze it, programming, give people data literacy.
Data that is in many cases trivial, of everyday life.
Si algo te hace gracia, pones LOL. Si algo te estremece, pones OMG. Si algo no lo entiendes, pones what the fuck. Esto me hace gracia, pongo LOL. LOL. Esto es
Superficial or otherwise, this vast amount of data is analyzed by the most powerful computers in order to extract patterns of behavior and make predictions. Today's big companies, which are no longer industrial, combine artificial intelligence systems with this information, with clues about our preferences on the internet, to launch new products and give us personalized encouragement to consume. Big data is also a very useful tool for governments for controlling the population. We expose ourselves to the world. We offer up our lives, which are collected by commercial and political interests, leading to a conflict over where the private sphere ends and the public sphere begins.
The question really is, who's in control of that data? And once again, how long is that data being retained?
The age of innocence is over. We are told that we have to sacrifice our freedom in order to guarantee our security. Both heroes and villains are rebelling against this invasion. And in a wonderful acrobatic loop, they reveal data that compromise these governments. Only a small part of the huge amount of data on the internet is accessible to search engines. The rest is on what is known as the so-called dark internet. It is accessed using systems like Tor, which protects users' anonymity and prevents them from being traced. Like so many other initiatives by the United States government, it seems to have bounced back against its original purpose. It was designed to be used by intelligence agents, but soon evolved into a system used by advocates of piracy and freedom of expression. And it quickly also became fertile ground for illegal activities. Drug traffickers, pedophiles, arms dealers, contract killers. For them, the dark internet is an impenetrable means for offering their services. Similarly, the use of big data, which can provide so many benefits, when combined with breakthroughs in research into our DNA profiles, can lead to the total control of our future. This monitoring and control which we're subjected to inspires mistrust, and this mistrust can lead to violence.
Our streets! Our streets!
Public mistrust of governments and big corporations has led to a trial of strength in which the winner has yet to be decided. Although some people don't seem bothered at all.
I think privacy is an illusion anyways, so I'm not as worried as other people because I never thought privacy existed anyways. I think anything I put that I type out is public, so that's just my whole philosophy on the internet.
An experiment carried out by Facebook without the consent of its users, which altered what they saw on their wall, raised the issue of violation of privacy by social networks once again. Some users were not happy about the project. At the geographical heart of the digital revolution, in Silicon Valley, where there are so many billionaires thanks to new technologies, is where there are the strongest signs of rejection extending into the real world. In this bar in San Francisco, a Google Glass user was assaulted. The use of these technologies is reviving the technophobia that had died down during the recent years of the growth of the digital paradise.
Don't like my picture taken. Oh, it's okay. No, not okay.
It's a private conversation.
All right, calm down.
Leave.
I think technophobia goes hand in hand with privacy. And the laws and regulations of the United States and of most of the world simply have not caught up.
A paradise from which some people would like to escape, albeit temporarily. The same technology that enables citizens to be controlled provides tools to circumvent it.
In protest after protest, what we see now are people using these tools to synchronize their opinions beforehand. We all agree that January 25th will be the day we take Tahrir Square, for example, in Egypt. They coordinate their actions. We're going to go down these streets and not those streets. And most critically, they use them to document the results. And that turns out to be the thing that autocrats are most terrified of, is the ability of pictures of police violence coming out.
The social networks are at the forefront. What is trending on the networks is followed up in other media. Those same networks are criticized for their data storage policy, their habitual tolerance of violence, and their unqualified censorship of naked bodies, for example. With a telephone, anyone can record a video and post it on the internet. Like the one of this racist attack on the Barcelona metro. The social networks boil over. The video appears on all media and channels. The police search for and apprehend the perpetrator of the attack, who they identify using the cameras on the metro. In this case, the producer of the video has given himself away as the attacker's accomplice. The internet turns on him, and he suffers from virtual harassment, with threats, insult, and his home address is disclosed. This naming and shaming is standard practice on the internet, where people feel safe due to distance, being part of the masses, and anonymity. There's nothing new under the sun. Virtual communities are the first experiences on the civil net. Social and artistic communities have now penetrated deeply into society.
There weren't very many big social changes because people were talking about the tools. These tools don't get socially interesting until they get technologically boring.
In these communities, The ideal of collaboration in the creation of digital promise assumes a powerful lease of life. A modest project like Wikipedia defeats large corporate encyclopedia projects.
People can actually pool our free time and talents to create new things, Wikipedia being the most famous example. But 15 years ago, I spent a lot of time studying the peer-to-peer phenomenon, Napster and so forth. And one of the really interesting examples was SETI at Home, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. And that was an early example of people pooling their resources. In that case, it was personal computers. They were pooling the computing power. But they created a giant supercomputer out of tiny parts. And I thought, as an analogy, humans could do that too.
In our society, we take for granted that we all have access to these media and tools. Differences in access to medical technology are the clearest example of digital inequality.
Thank God we have anesthesia. Thank God we have robotic laparoscopic surgery. These things are all to the good. Who would want to go back to the, breast cancer surgery in even the Victorian era? If you've seen daguerreotypes, they're not pretty to look at, all right? But the point is that technology isn't something that happens in a vacuum. It is historically contingent and it is culturally bounded.
Together with health, education is the other great cornerstone of a democratic society. Nicholas Negroponte, one of the most influential thinkers on the digital society in the 1990s, has spent the past few years fighting against the digital divide by distributing laptops to children around the world.
The real priority is learning. Absolutely the top priority. I think the digital world is also going to help education. And so, yes, a better world is made out of education and economic growth and, the elements of a happy world and a more just world are deeply rooted in the things that the digital world provides. In our case, we deployed 3 million laptops, and we did it in 40 countries and 25 languages. The World Bank contributed 0. The African Development Bank, 0. The American government, 0. It was about $1 billion. It was a very large amount of money. Came mostly from the treasuries of the countries themselves.
And there are other perhaps more democratic keys to accessing new media. But there are still the same rules with the same old business logic.
Well, I do have a lot of experience with successful web videos. If you want to hire me to direct a video for your brand that we attempt, that with the goal of it becoming popular, I could do that. But you can't just order up a viral video. Okay, here it is. Today's mission is called Mannequin Mob. We're going to be giving the Gap on 5th Avenue 50 extra.
Perhaps virality, virtual word of mouth, is not a phenomenon as spontaneous as it seems. In fact, the major access highways are like when there were only a few television channels. If there's a monopoly on the distribution, the distributor can determine the content. For example, Amazon controls 60% of the book market in the United States and 90% of the e-book market.
Anyone that thinks that they have control, I think it's an illusion because it's this very changing distribution of who's in control. That's what's so wonderful about it.
Equal access to content or neutrality has already been called into question by the practices of the search engines and major content distributors. Now obtaining content will be faster and easier to reach if you pay. We are waking up from the dream of thinking that some things are free.
I think that the internet in the United States and all over the world should be considered what's called a common carrier, which means that the broadband coming into your apartment should be regulated by the government in the same way that the water coming into your apartment is, the same way the electricity is.
Sherman. She's from PS1, I guess.
And they're sharing a pod.
Yeah, she's the executive director of PS1.
And you're allowed to share a pod.
What I really probably need is a weapon to protect me.
Josh Harris, an imaginative and flamboyant entrepreneur, became rich during the dot-com era, before the internet bubble burst.
That's the experiment. You know, we don't really know what they're going to do.
Where pod land's going to be right here, folks, right here.
You hear like worker bees, you know? It's like, this is the worker bee cocoon.
In 1999, he launched what he called an experiment. He locked 100 people who would live together 24 hours a day in a New York basement. Multiple cameras relayed everything that happened over the internet. Bedrooms, dining room, bathroom, the entertainment room, the surprising shooting range.
Perfect analogy of what
The city police soon put a stop to the experiment.
So the fire department was sort of like stuck, you know, they wanted me to come around.
At the same time, the television program Big Brother began, using a similar approach. Exhibiting your most private side in public has become commonplace, as if nobody could have any secrets anymore, as if everything had to be shared.
People spend their life very connected, but also very alone. And that in some ways reminds me of what it's like to be in a city where you have a lot of weak ties, a lot of ties to a lot of people that are on the basis of hi, 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 hi. And yet you feel at the end of the day, who do I really know? Who is really there for me?
People are much more willing to share digital data than analog data. If you want me to give you a book, I don't have that book anymore. If you want me to give you a digital copy of the book, that feels to me like a different kind of sharing.
The opportunity for virtual duplication is what we have left from the digital utopia. Once again, the idea of disguise, of being someone else.
On the net, you can edit. You can get it right. Because the profile on social media is not you. It's a performance piece. For a teenage boy writing a profile, that profile is the product of hours. We present ourselves as a brand, we present ourselves as the way we wish we could be, as the place where we don't have conversations, we have little sips of communication.
Pero tía, o sea, no sé, yo expreso lo que siento, no como tú, tanto filtro y tanta hostia, que eres una falsa.
Cariño, pero ¿a quién le importa cómo seas en realidad? Se trata de vender cualidades que puedan atraer a tus posibles clientes.
¿Qué clientes?
¿Tú no ves que todos los tíos que te molan no te acaban haciendo ni puto caso?
Oye, no mezcles, o sea, esto no tiene nada.
All of those dreams we had of cyberspace as a place you would go actually turned out to be not imaginative enough. What really happened was that cyberspace was something that went into us. You can't separate the network from real life anymore.
The digital is added to the real. It doesn't replace it. They interact and compete with each other.
Lo analógico y lo digital conviven en un solo mundo. Es que eso es así.
There have been several technological revolutions since first tools were invented and how to make fire was discovered. Those changes that were not mere improvements, but outright breaks with the past. Now we're at the epicenter of a transformation that could be more radical than all the previous ones.
I think that people didn't realize, I didn't realize, how intimately these technologies were going to touch on the most powerful, intimate, personal aspects of our heart, of our personal decisions, of our lives, of our relationships. and that we needed to take care because we're very vulnerable.
Some talk about those who do not adapt becoming extinct, as happened during other technological revolutions.
Everybody shifts in the same way that everybody shifted during the Industrial Revolution. Even the people who were left behind on the farm, during the move to cities and the rise of the steam engine, even the people left behind on the farm had their lives changed. Even people who are not using computers, don't have cell phones in their pocket, not using the internet, are going to have their lives altered, are now having their lives altered by this change.
Now that idealism is over, we still have the practical aspect of the promise of endless possibilities. A life that is easier, more comfortable, better. Provided that we're permanently connected, hooked.
I don't believe the world's going to hell. I don't believe, just generally, if you look throughout history, we managed to keep moving forward.
I'm optimistic, and I have always been optimistic, but in part because I'm optimistic on a historical time frame.
I'm the most optimistic person I know.
Would you voluntarily disconnect if everyone around you did? Would you go back? Almost no one would.
And I think that technology has made our lives better. It continues to make our lives better.
I believe digital promise is definitely a double-edged sword. I believe it's playing with fire. Fire can keep us warm. Fire can give us light, but fire can also burn us. It can kill us.
The near future is happening now.
Near future is only 500 tweets away.
El futuro siempre llega tarde.
El futuro lo veo fantástico, hibridizando.
Confusing.
Stifling.
Connected.
Variedad.
Éxtasis.
Precarious.
Una incógnita.
The realization of the danger.
Complete disruption.
Predicting a future that is not simply the continuation of the past seems impossible. Maybe we should accept that we have no idea what is going to happen next.
Governments of the industrial world, you weary giants of flesh and steel, I come from cyberspace, the new home of mind. On behalf of the future, I ask you of the past to leave us alone. You are not welcome among us. You have no sovereignty where we gather. Your legal concepts of property, expression, identity, movement, and context do not apply to us. They are all based on matter, and there is no matter here. We must declare our virtual selves immune to your sovereignty, even as we continue to consent to your rule over our bodies. We will spread ourselves across the planet so that no one may arrest our thoughts. We will create a civilization of the mind in cyberspace. May it be more humane and fair than the world your governments have made before.
Sé lo que estáis pensando.